Hello everybody, welcome to our Trust Board meeting on the 27th of October 2021. Welcome to all those who are participating in our board today, but also all of you who may be watching to hear what we have to say and the sort of issues we're discussing. So welcome everybody. Could I start with apologies for absence? Are there any apologies for absence? Meeting on the 27th of October 2021. Thank you very much, Jenny. And we'll move on to item 2, declarations of interest today. But also, obviously, if there are any who may be changes to the declarations, please notify the Trust Secretary. And if anyone sees an item on the agenda that may have a conflict with, please declare your interest and remove yourself from the meeting for that item. Are there any potential conflicts of interest that colleagues wish to raise? No, thank you very much. We'll move on to the minutes of the last meeting held on the 29th of September. Are these an accurate record? Are there any changes anybody would like to make to the record? No, thank you very much. They are received and noted, and we move on to the action log and matters arising. Are there any matters arising from the minutes or the action log, please?
Chair, on page 21, I was just wondering where we got to on the annual non-clinical safety report one. We put picture on the front cover to be reviewed and replaced. It seems a really old action from July. I just wondered if it had been done. Okay. Would anyone like to comment on that?
That was an action for me, Chair, and apologies if I misinterpreted it, but I took it as updating the picture for next year's report and not for this year's.
I think, Pete, that Mike mentioned it for this year because the picture was on there that wasn't socially distanced from memory.
Could I just add that it's going to Quality Committee next week and we have updated the picture on the front?
I will. Right. I think it was an online document anyway, so it should have been relatively easy just to update that as opposed to a printed version. But thanks for that update. Thanks, Francis. Anybody else got a matters arising? Thank you very much. Moving on to then our staff story, and we have Rob Atkinson with us today, who's the Deputy Director of Estates. And I think although it's got Pete on the agenda to introduce, I think Steve is going to do it because the work that Rob is going to talk to us about arose actually from staff feedback on what they felt was important about where they work. Steve, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. Just a quick sort of scene setting, really. So you'll recall from our staff survey scores that we received last year. So broadly, really positive, real steps in most of the questions that we moved forward with. But we had kind of 8 questions that are in the lowest scoring category for us, and actually 2 of those 8 kind of were linked to staff well-being, both with regards to having a place to go for rest and recreation, and having food and catering facilities available to them. So part of the work that we did as a result of doing that was some investment in our estate, and what Rob will do is take you through and show you what we've done, how we're rolling that out, both so as a kind of you said we did for our staff, and just making sure that we kind of improve the lot of work for staff working for the trust. So that's sort of the context for the presentation that Rob's going to give. So Rob, I'll hand across to you if that's okay.
Thanks very much. Morning, everybody.
Morning.
So you have to forgive me. I'm going to try and present my screen. So apologies if this goes horribly wrong. So bear with me, please. Has that appeared? That's a good start. Yeah. Thank you. Right. I just need to get my version so I can see my notes. That's not working for me, so you might have to see the side of my head, unfortunately. So, morning, everybody. Yes, as Steve said, the staff survey feedback that we received in 2020, there was a couple of questions where we scored relatively low on those, and that's been recognised. And as a response to that, the capital programme has put together, and we've allocated £500,000 in there for staff improvements for staff wellbeing areas. So that forms part of the capital programme that we've got, and is monitored on a bi-monthly basis. As Steve mentioned, the Staff Health and Wellbeing Engagement Group are overseeing this, and we report into those. from that, there was an understanding that there needed to be some staff engagement and staff ownership of this, and what do folk actually want to be able to improve their environments. So we've had some willing volunteers came out of that group, and we had a staff engagement group, and they established what the standards would be for this, and fed back to the engagement group. The base items that were identified was providing for a domestic environment, a calm and relaxing space, and to have local staff involvement. So one of the things that we identified was actually having some level of standardisation, but having that ability to be able to modify the environment as required to suit the needs of the people on site. So this is mainly around artwork and plants and trying to not personalise it, but trying to create it a bit more bespoke to the environment that they were put in. Now, one of the feedbacks we did get was it needs to be something that feels like you're not at work, almost an escape from the workplace. So avoiding the corporate look as far as possible. The corporate colours are in there and they're captured as a highlight in places, but the idea would be is you're not at your desk, you're away from the workplace. So part of the data collection is we issued out to 55 of our sites. That's specifically in relation to our freehold and leasehold estate, that we have the ability to affect any change within that. The sites were contacted. There was the specific managers on the site that have been identified during the COVID period that have taken a lead role specifically on the way that we're working in a COVID safe way. But that's been really useful for us as an estate function to be able to speak to those individuals and take a lead from those. They've obviously been speaking with their colleagues on sites, but we've got those individuals identified. There were some sites that responded that did say they're okay, they didn't need any improvements to their environments. There was, accepting that there's only 7 of those, but we still need to speak with those and understand, is that really the case? Do we need to do any further work to improve those sites? We're still trying to get some responses from some of our own sites, accepting that the staff groups are busy, but we do need to chase up on those further 18 sites that we've yet to still receive a response on. So that's something we've been talking through. The good news is we've had 30 sites that have responded, and these are the sites we've been working with in this first wave to be able to move these on. So of that, we've got 31 kitchens that have been identified for refurbishment. There's 13 staff rooms. There's a creation of some additional space, and that was a big point of engagement that we've had with the staff groups. Is not only what can we do to improve what you've got, is what can we do to enhance what facilities you have, because accepting we've got a limited estate and things are quite tight. Can we release some capacity? Can we put something else on the site to create that additional resource to be able to support the staff group? So that was the 3 staff kitchens, and there's 4 staff rooms, additional staff rooms that have been identified. There's 1 staff locker room that was requested, and then there's 3 modular buildings. Specifically, Maister was a case in point, and that is at Miranda House as well, and on the Avondale site, because it's been recognised, particularly on Avondale at the outset of the pandemic, that it was particularly challenging for the clinicians on site to be able to provide the service to the patients and socially distance and all those other things that we need to do to be able to support the staff. So that was on Avondale, and that happened quite early on in the piece. So the works that we've actually got programmed in and are undertaking and completing in certain cases is to strip the rooms out, bring it back to basically the surface finishes and refit from new. So it includes where we're putting in kitchens and staff welfare provisions, new kitchen fittings, furniture. That includes white goods. So there's any fridges, cookers, anything like that. It's mainly microwaves, fridges, boilers and cold taps. Because one of the big things that the staff had requested, and I know we have ongoing discussions around the use of water coolers, the specific challenge that we have with water coolers and water safety control. So these chiller taps are seen as being a safe option, and it actually gives a benefit to the staff group where possible, particularly in the staff rooms, a TV. So there's the flat screen TVs going in there, redecorating, new flooring, there's lighting, and then there's the artwork and plants to try and give it that bit more of a domestic feel that we talked about earlier, which is something that's been taken up locally and it's been quite well received as far as I can see. So currently we've got 8 sites that have been completed to date, but that has basically been on the back of getting that engagement, understanding what staff need, and providing something that is useful for the staff going forward. So whilst we've got 8 completed now, we've got another 6 on site. So we started to get on with these works now, which you'll start seeing across the trust. We've awarded a further 10, so we've got contracts awarded for a further 10 sites with our contractors, and they're mobilising at the moment. And we've got a further 8 tenders that are under review. The last section is we've got another 23 that are in design development, and they'll be worked up. And the intention, and I'm sure it's on a later slide, but the intention with all of these is they're going to be there's 31 that are going to be completed by Christmas. So what you can see here is this is the quality of the estate that we've had, and it has been a challenge, and I think it's been fed back, and it obviously reflects in the staff survey response. College House is a case in point where we have been contacted on a number of occasions to identify that it does need some attention. So it's been very helpful to be able to get on with these works, and it's quite rewarding, to be fair. So you can see we're stripping all these kitchens out, the flooring, all the decorations. This was an old ADL kitchen that was being used as a staff kitchen at Coltman Street. So you can see this is where we're taking everything back. In Humber Centre here, this was being used as a music room. This is one of the facilities where the staff on site had reappropriated that space to be able to be used for staff welfare provision. So these are some of the nice new units going in. Now this is going to be the trick if it works. So we've got a bit of a time lapse that's showing some of the works that were going on, and this is the Humber Centre in particular. So we started midway through, as you can see in the video. So the new kitchen has gone in. They're putting the new flooring in there. So that's part of what we're talking about. The new flooring is having this sort of timber effect. Try and keep it as domestic as possible. There's a new lockers going in there for the staff. TV, and some of the chairs. So we've got some of the supporting chairs. So you can see from this, so the colour scheme is fairly muted, but with highlighted some of the corporate colours, and then it's enabling the staff, once that's complete, to be able to make it a little bit more personal to them on site, and that has actually worked, which is good. So as you can see, Humber Centre was one of the cases in point, but this is Millview on the first floor. That's the Humber Centre, so you can see the lockers there that the staff are using. Millview again, so it's some of the plantings going in and so on. And that's Miranda House. That is for a long time. It's a similar case to College House. It's needed some attention for quite some time, really. Humber Centre, the other side. So these are some of the comments that we've received back from staff, and accepting at this moment in time, we've only completed 8. It's been really positive to date. We have been working around and understanding that it has been causing disruption on site. There's works going on in Mary Seacole and so on, where the estates team are based, and it does cause a level of disruption. But the benefit that's realised at the end of it, I think everybody can see. So as I said earlier, we've got 31 schemes that are programmed to be complete by Christmas, and the remaining schemes that we've got on the drawing board as part of the thermometer that I showed earlier will be completed by the end of the financial year. We've got those other sites that we do need to engage with and ensure that they're covered, and we're not missing a trick on those. So that's something we are chasing up with. So just to finish with, there's some other short pieces of work that we're getting on with in terms of the bike shelters. So that's something to be able to encourage people to cycle to work and have somewhere that's secure to cycle to work. So we know there's issues across our sites with bikes being stolen, etc. So they're going to be installed, particularly in the inpatient units, by December, but we are rolling that across the estate, that we're able to install that and we can affect that. We've got the doctors on call accommodation up at Miranda House. So that's been enhanced. So that's been recognised as needed some work for some time. We have funding that sits outside of the staff wellbeing funds to be able to enhance that. There's PQ and the inpatient area wards that have been enhanced to try and create an environment that's conducive for staff and patients in those environments. And that is our interim position, recognising the wider works that are going to the redevelopment of the mental health inpatient estate. But you can see from that it's created a better and more conducive environment for what we've got at this moment in time. There's Maester Lodge, the works that we're undertaking at Maester Lodge and have just completed to be able to create the additional pod at Maester Lodge for the older people services. And there's the exciting scheme at the Humber Centre to redevelop or refurbish, should I say, particularly the 3 original wards in Humber Centre. Lastly, just as a point, in terms of maintaining our estate and trying to ensure that our estate is kept up to a standard, we do report, and this goes to the health and safety group, report on our performance in terms of our response to maintenance and maintaining the estate. So as you can see here, we've had 3,786 calls to date in the year, and we've attended 85% on time, and 87 have been completed in time. We're still working to improve on that, but these are the strides that we're making to ensure that when things on a reactive maintenance basis are reported, that we're actually responding to it. And I think that is me. If there's any questions, I'll stop presenting now.
Thanks very much, Rob. That was brilliant, and I've seen some of the work at obviously at Whitby Hospital, which I'll mention a bit later for myself, and it's really good, and what a great presentation, and the interactive stuff did work. I can see Pete has got his hand up. Pete.
Thanks, Chair. So firstly, just thanks to Rob, great presentation. Saw it at Senior Leadership Forum last week and it was really well received there. So, just a big thank you for coming today to present. I think just to remind the board that, our capital programme this year is probably the biggest since my time in the trust. And that's reflective of all the hard work that's gone on for the last 4 or 5 years in delivering our financial position, where we've then benefited from sustainability funding and bonus funding for hitting our financial targets, which has built up our cash reserves. And often the question I'm asked by the man on the street is, we've got all this cash, why can't we spend it? Well, we're now starting to be able to invest that in capital, so that's really good. I guess you'll be chasing the 18, won't you, Rob, that haven't yet responded. And I think, Steve did a bit of a Jim Bowen at our leadership forum, which is just have a look at what you could have. So for those 18 that haven't responded, I'd encourage them to come back, because the quality of estate that's going in and the works for colleagues is brilliant. And just finally, your last slide was great, Rob. I was going to say, the work you get through as a team, you're a relatively modest team. It's 80 to 90 sites you're maintaining, and to hit 86% of KPIs on your reactive maintenance for that volume of work is absolutely fantastic. So that's a thank you to you and the wider estates team from me. It's a pleasure to work with you guys.
Thanks, Pete. Dean.
Yeah, thanks very much, Rob. Just a couple of comments, really, rather than questions. Really enjoyed the presentation. First of all, I suppose it's just a shout out for the estates and facilities staff. I know on the back of COVID, a lot of news coverage tends to focus on doctors and nurses, but I think sort of cleaners, domestic staff, catering staff, drivers, the trades have done a fantastic job. In exceptional circumstances, and just appropriate to recognise that in addition to the work that they've been doing here. That's great to see. It's also great, isn't it, to see responding to feedback from the staff survey. So not just doing this on a whim, but sort of investing it in a sort of you said we did sort of way. And then finally, whilst it makes sense, doesn't it, to get good working environments for staff, particularly when they're working so hard and need those breaks. This is also an investment in patient care, because we know that where staff feel valued, where staff are engaged, where they've got good working environments, then they're more likely to be giving better patient care. So this is an investment in the front line of patient care, as well as supporting our staff. So thanks for that. Really appreciate it, Rob. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter.
Okay, thanks, Caroline, and thanks, Rob. That's really great work that you're doing there. I was just going to ask about the role of any charitable funds in any of this, because we've got, I think it's called a big thank you fund, and I wondered if that was something that was capable of being accessed to sort of fund some of these works. And I also wondered, some of the kitchen manufacturers, whether, because it's the NHS, are they able to give us a special discount, or even a charitable donation, for some of this kit that's being supplied. That is basically value for money and using charitable funds. Rob,
we could certainly Peter, tap into the charitable funds, and we are working alongside those. So that's something we'll talk with that team about. And I know they do support the added sparkle, as they call it, to enhance that facility. So that is certainly something we could speak with them about. In terms of engaging with suppliers, that is a challenge, and we do speak with them. It has been it's been a challenge via the procurement process, but it's not to say that it's not something we can still reinvestigate.
Thanks, Rob. Does that answer your question, Peter? Did you want to come back? You're happy with that? Good. Okay, thank you. I've got Steve.
Thanks, Caroline. Echo everything that's been said, Rob. It's been fantastic. It's gone down so well with staff. Your team have done an amazing job on that, and we'll keep that roll out. And it's great that through Lynn's chairing of the staff wellbeing and engagement group, we've really had that link to feed in with you. So very much driven by staff. Just to come back on that charitable funds bit, Peter, as well. Actually, again, one of the benefits out of this is because we've now got some clarity. Real clarity about what the trust provides, and then as by definition what added sparkle will be the bit on top of that. That's actually allowed charitable funds to be a little bit more streamlined, because actually what they were getting was probably requests to do things that Rob and Pete's team would do anyway. So I think there's now a greater understanding of the trust will provide this. If you want something over and above, that's when we get into the charitable funds and the sparkle. So it's helped actually to maybe define that better than it was previously, and be really sort of more targeted on the sparkle. So as Rob said, definite potential to take it to that next level for teams. But maybe the sort of request for a toaster and that they were getting before, we now know that we will provide that as a trust. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Pete, did you have your hand up? Or have you taken it down? You're on mute.
I did, Chair, but Steve's covered my point. We've now got a minimum spec for kitchens, so staff know what to expect in a recreation room, and therefore that really gives clarity between directing it to Rob and my team or to charitable funds.
Thanks. Michelle.
Morning, Chair. Morning, everybody. I don't want to repeat everything that's been said, but I just want to take this opportunity just to obviously say thank you to Rob, but also that I've seen some of this work in progress, and actually staff are saying it's not that disruptive, and obviously I think they're really appreciative of it. So that is a major issue, and I've seen some of the completed work as well. But it's just to build on what Dean said, that everybody in the organisation affects patient care wherever they work, and I think this is a real great demonstration of what we mean by that. And it's not just on this, Rob, it's just the amount of work and the enormous amount of work and the speed at which you've had to do some of it, be the seclusion rooms, be it the capital work for staff. I just want to personally just to echo everything that's been said, and it's really great to see you at board, actually, just so that you can hear that, because we often say it, but your team, because it isn't a massive team, is doing a remarkable job to make a difference to staff lives, but also to patients' lives as well. So a sincere thank you from me, and just to remind the board that we have got wobble rooms in place as well. So this is additional to some of the wobble rooms that staff have and find really helpful, and obviously we'll continue to roll those out where we've got capacity and space to do it. But again, thank you, Rob, for everything that you're doing in your team, and the leadership as well. It is phenomenal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Michelle. I don't see any other hands up there. So Rob, thank you so much for your presentation today. And I just noticed that John Byrne said in the chat box, echoing what other people have said about the support, of your team to making everything we do in the trust work in a better way is really vital. But also John mentioned the massive support estates and facilities gave to the vaccine programme as well, including, I see in the chat box, finding a vaccine fridge or freezer or whatever to make things work too. So it's probably above and beyond what most people think that an estates department does. So it's been great to have you showcase that today. And obviously any help we can give to get those people who haven't responded to do so, let us know. Thanks very much, Rob.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes. That was great. That was great. It was really good to see all of that good work, and also just to hear about the momentum in terms of moving forward as well. That this is a, this is a work in progress. It's great. So moving on to my chair's report. Well, first of all, just to say that I was really pleased this last month, as it was Black History Month, to both meet one-to-one virtually with Grace Garver, who is the chair of the BAME network. And also take part with Michelle actually in the Black History Month launch, as well as a separate session where I had discussion with staff about my work. They asked me questions. Hanif was there as well. So it was great to have that opportunity. And I think, there are some things that have come up that I know we are conscious of working on, about how we support our BAME staff, about how they can contribute to the work within the trust. And certainly in the conversations, one of the things came up about supporting the recruitment work we've done internationally with nurses and other clinicians coming to our area to work, and they certainly wanted to be positively part of that. I think too, there were also questions raised sometimes about some of the abuse that they face and how we deal with that, and I think that's something we should be upfront about and be conscious about, and include in our discussions about our staff's health and well-being. But it was good to see a variety of activities on that this month. I also had my first Meet Caroline session and also my first quarterly staff awards. On the quarterly staff awards, I have to say it was so fascinating asking those long-serving staff members about what it was like when they first joined the health service and how it's changed over the decades, and hear their thoughts about what happened then and now. Uniforms came up a lot. I see this is going to be a recurring discussion during my time in the trust about what staff think of that, but it was really great. And I think whilst it was a virtual staff awards, and I think everyone was sent a little parcel with a cake, I think, and a Yorkshire tea bag in it, I think there is a real hope that at some point will they be able to get the tea set out properly and have people together on a face-to-face celebration of their long service, as well as those employees who've been nominated for their service up above and beyond, according to their colleagues, what they've contributed. As I said earlier, it's been really great to do some visits since the last board meeting. I spent a day at Whitby Hospital and half a day at Inspire, as well as 2 virtual visits to Millview Lodge and also Newbridges. Newbridges just yesterday. I mean, the Whitby Hospital, for those of you who've been there and those who haven't, just to reiterate, really, I mean, it is an amazing refurbishment of a building, and hearing the stories of what it was like before, and also seeing the half demolished other part of the site still to be done. I think it's been quite a transformation for people, and it not only in terms of the build, but enabling services to get back on track and be delivered even better than they were before. That was really good to see. But also, I have to say, it really gave me an insight to, that part of our service and the people who work there and what they do, and a sense also of the sort of geography of our patch and where we cover, and the logistics of providing services across this wide area. So I was really pleased to be there for that. And likewise, a very different build in many respects, Inspire, just the other week as well. I spent half a day there and focused obviously on the inpatient services and taking me through the build and what was the differences there. That was really interesting. And I really hope to be able to go back and spend a bit more time with those working on home treatment, because that's an important part of that service too, which seems to be expanding and is a really good example of our cooperation and work with others in the community to make sure that our service users are supported at their home base. The governor elections, nominations have closed for the governor elections. We've had a good response. There's going to be an election in the East Riding constituency for the public governors. There are still a few vacancies that we need to address, and I think have a discussion about how we can encourage participation going forward, particularly in terms of patient and service users. The NED recruitment process is on schedule and on track. We've just completed long listing the other week, and all things being equal, we should be on track to meet the Extraordinary Council of Governors meeting on the 7th of December, which has been arranged to ratify the recommendations for appointment. My first Council of Governors meeting I chaired was well attended, and we had some good discussions there, and I've been really pleased to be able to meet some individual public governors and staff governors since that. I also met with Mandy Dawley, Head of Patient Care Experience and Engagement, to have a talk about the work that is both developed and supported, but some of the work that is in process of being established, for example, the Youth Board. And we talked about next year's programme and how I might support the activities in 2022. Discussions continue at the HCV, Humber, Coast and Vale ICS Advisory Board, and we've got an item on the agenda today about some of that work. So that's my report, and happy to take any questions. No? Fine. Good. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to Michelle's Chief Executive report.
Thanks, Chair. A very busy month, and a very quick induction to the organisation as well, covering a lot of ground, so good to hear that. Thank you. Everybody's had a chance to read my report. I'll just pick out a couple of things as usual. Obviously, it's great to see the continued work in the co-production. As you know, we're really motoring on our co-production work, and it's really great to have a stamp that we can demonstrate just where and what has been co-produced. Again, thanks to Mandy and the team for that. Again, a small team, but producing some phenomenal work. Congratulations to the HR team, award winners. So it's always great to celebrate things, but especially in the middle of a pandemic. So well done, and that was for the HR analytics. So fantastic, and I've seen the trophy as well. It's a nice square. So we're going to have to get that trophy cabinet, Pete, that we've been talking about in reception, even though we don't have many visitors into reception. But it's another one for that. But no, seriously, I think it really demonstrates the amount of work, cross work in the organisation that's taking place. So thanks to Steve and the team for that, and everybody else. There's been a lot on our international nurses. It's great to meet them. Fingers crossed they went down for the Oscars yesterday. So Hilary may have a bit of an update on that. I'm not sure. It's pretty hot off the presses, that. People may have seen the ITV programme on the international nurses. It was good to see, but they are a great bunch. And as I say, fingers crossed for yesterday. And we're already in the next process of the next cohort for the international nurses coming into the organisation. I have put something in there about Right Care, Right Person update, which is an important development which we've spoke about before with the police. And this is about section 136. Patients and the risk assessment, and then the police leaving them, not actually physically leaving them, but transferring the care over to wherever that place of safety may be. And this comes into effect from the 1st of November. We have got a small pot of money that we're looking to see how we can utilise that to maximise the benefit of that and any potential implications that has. What I've intended to do with my systems hat on is do a bit of a pilot and review that in 6 months and just see what the implications are as we go through. But just to remind people that does start from the 1st of November. The HCV is obviously developing the chief exec post. They have been advertised. I think they're due to be announced around the middle of November, beginning of November. But obviously we have got the chair confirmed, which is Sue Swimminson, which is great. Sue was chair of York, so obviously is known to the area. So, and I think she's starting to do some induction work. So that's good. Lynn may want to pick up the neurodiversity service. There's lots of really positivity on that, lots of really good development. Again, the KeyWise strategy, and we approved that strategy. It's great to see that come into life as well, because remember, strategies need to be lived. We continue with developing our trust strategy. And I thank the board members that have been to the series of sessions that we've had. We've got a couple more planned, but we're also doing an extensive consultation and engagement piece of work with staff, because again, the strategy is for everybody. So it's for our staff, our stakeholders. And I thank Pete's team for leading that work. I think that's a big piece of work, and I look forward to seeing how we're going to develop some of the massive feedback that we've been getting. The usual comms update is in there, lots of work carrying on with comms. We've got a couple of new posts in place to replace people who've moved on, and also the Health Stars update. As the Chair alluded to, it's been a busy month for awareness days, be it the mental health, be it the Black History Month, and I've had lots of interactions with lots of people, and it's been great to see the diversity. But again, thanks to comms for putting those webinars on and for getting people together, as well as the leaders in those particular areas. I'm just going to pause and say winter is expected to be tough. We've had the winter plan, we had that last time. I thank to Lynn and the team about really thinking ahead in relationship to business continuity, and it's something that we will have a bigger conversation with at next month's meeting. And we can say that we've never actually been out of winter, but I do expect it to be a difficult, tough month. And I'll hand over to Michelle Hughes, because I think she wants to pick up a couple of things, but I'll pause there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Michelle Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. Just it is a very large report, so just to very briefly pick out a couple in the comms section. The brand centre in particular, the number of users is very encouraging, demonstrating staff engagement with and the ownership of our brand. This, of course, ensures consistency of the face of our organisation on trust documents and the interface with stakeholders, etc. Awareness days have already been mentioned, and the team do continue to mark and support a number of awareness days every month, and it was a very busy October. And just finally, on media coverage, our ongoing quality proactive PR campaigns have again reaped rewards with high media interest. 37 positive news stories in month, which is a great statistic. In particular, internationally recruited nurses drew great coverage in print and on TV. And in relation to media, just a thank you to Lauren, who day-to-day coordinates and promotes this. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Okay, is any more contributions to the Chief Exec's report from members of the EMT before we go to questions? Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. One thing that just kind of beat the deadline, just to mention, we act as part of our recruitment initiatives. We actually went to Dublin to a recruitment fair 2 weeks ago. We've had some fantastic responses to that. So over 30 contacts from nurses looking to are interested in joining the trust, plus others. So I think a real positive. Just like to pass my thanks on to John as well. So John, being as it was in Dublin, John turned up and represented the trust for us over that weekend. So that was really helpful to have a local, as it were, selling the wares of Humber. So thanks, John, and thanks to the team to go across, because I think it's definitely generated some interest, which is great. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. And I can see Lynn.
Thank you, yes, Chair. I guess just to add a little bit to Michelle's overview, particularly in relation to the COVID reports in Michelle's report. So obviously operational pressures remained high in September and October. And unfortunately, we're not seeing those pressures abate for the reasons that Michelle has said. If anything, they've risen further. So we really are seeing those pressures across our acute hospital partners, particularly with the rising COVID admissions related obviously to the infection rate. Combine those with the pressures in social care across our area, with some of the issues and pressures around staffing in particularly the home care market. And also combine that with some of the pressures that are still raising, unfortunately, in primary care. It does mean that the system is really hot, for want of a better word, at the moment as well. Obviously, that has meant that we've really continued to work hard with our system partners over the recent weeks, really to make sure that our surge winter planning is as good as it can be to mitigate that. There are some further short-term monies in relation to winter, and certainly we've benefited from that, and obviously really working hard to make sure that we place that in the right position to offset those pressures, but all obviously sort of underpinned by ongoing challenges around workforce as well. So I'm sorry to Chair to paint a sort of negative picture there, but I think what Michelle describes as the coming months really being very difficult in the system. I think unfortunately is where we're going to be. As I say, our planning is good as it can be. We're currently, reviewing our business continuity plans as well, but it's hard to see how we won't be in a position over the coming months to need to enact those across some of our service areas. And I think again it'd be good to talk again at next board around sort of what that means in reality.
Thanks very much for that, Lynn. I mean, clearly it's really important that we are aware of the challenges that we're facing, and we'll take that as an item for the next board meeting, I think, and maybe we'll come back to it after that at the next board meeting if necessary, but let's take that as an action from today. Thanks for that, Lynn. I'll move on to my colleagues, the non-executive directors, and I've got Mike Smith up first.
Thanks very much, Chair. Excellent report, broad breadth of stuff again. A couple of things that I'd love that give a real flavour to this report is the logo for the co-production and the neurodiversity work. On the architectural principle that form follows function, what we've got here is the base works, the frameworks for some really good service improvements. We'll come on to waiting times later in the performance report, but what we've got here in the neurodiversity is the implementation of a really forward-thinking strategy, and you're able to see things happening on the ground. So I congratulate the team on achieving this. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Francis.
Thanks, Chair. And I'd agree with Mike. My questions fall in three areas, really. It was the COVID, the neuro and the strategy, so I'll do them one at a time. Lynn's kind of answered some of it, because I was just going to ask, obviously this report was written 10 days ago probably, and there's been an increase in the system, so you've answered most of it. I was just wondering how we were doing in our own primary care areas, and then also within the COVID area, I was wondering how we'd got on with the recruitment at Meister, because you were talking about it being potentially done by the end of October, which we're pretty close to. I just wondered if you could give us an update on that to start with, Lynn.
Yes, thank you, Francis. So in relation to COVID and pressures in primary care, our own GP practices, like the rest of the system, Francis, are under pressure at the moment. I think on the positive note, because we have done quite an amount, as you know, through the Finance and Investment Committee of transformational change work, particularly around the workforce, and maybe we're in a sort of, I wouldn't say sort of, a slightly better position to some degree. However, we are challenged by GP recruitment in the same way that the national picture is, as you know, but we have done that workforce skill mix change across our practices as well. So again, our focus at the moment obviously is making sure that our workforce across primary care, is fully recruited where we can do that substantively, and obviously where we're not able to, we are utilising sort of locums where we're able to do that. Again, some of our change work, particularly around sort of bringing practices together, I think has put us in a positive footing where we've been able to do that. However, Francis, I think like the rest of our workforce, our primary care workforce, are finding this a very challenging environment to work within. So again, I think all of that work around sort of supporting our staff from a health and wellbeing point of view is really key and important here as well. But we are doing our utmost, and very much primary care has been front and centre of our winter planning as well.
And finally, on that, I've probably asked this one before and forgotten, but there's some great work here talking about the recovery for long COVID, etc. Roughly, how many people have we got of our team with long COVID?
Steve, I don't know if you have the data on that. I don't have it to hand.
It changes, Francis, but at the last check that we had, which was a couple of weeks ago, was about 6.
So it's not that many.
It's pretty small numbers overall, but
it's not. I don't think it's in double figures, Francis. But we'll send it across to you. We'll put it in the board minutes, and it might be something we just keep an eye on at workforce committee, maybe just periodically.
That's good to hear. I mean, 6, it's unfortunate for the 6, but it's good to hear that it's as low as 6. On the neurodiversity, I'd echo Mike, looks really good. And obviously there's been all of the stuff in the press over the last week or so about not picking up on ADHD in women as against men. So I presume that's going to be part of the focus of this work. And then the only other bit was around the strategy piece. If I can just find my notes. So just a question. Again, it looks really good, and I've been hearing bits about how the strategy and the engagement's been great. It's been talking about, it talks in here about the overarching strategy and then the supporting strategies. And I'm just making sure that we've got it the right way round, that the overarching strategy comes first and then the other ones align to that to support it, because it just doesn't quite read in that way. And then the other point was around differentiating, because there's a great bit here about making it easy for staff to understand, which was spot on, but differentiating between how we communicate it and what that high level strategy is in detail behind that, because obviously it's what goes behind. But those strategy sessions we've been having have been really helpful in doing that. But thanks, that was it really.
Thanks very much, Francis. Peter.
Oh, thanks, Caroline. Yeah, my comment is about COVID again, because I'm reading, in the press and in Michelle's report as well, of course, that a lot of our staff are subject to compulsory. It's compulsory. They are double jabbed to maintain their work in the community services or care home settings such as Granville, etc. And I know it's not the 11th of November yet, but I just wondered if there's, with the small number of staff who are not vaccinated, what will happen to them now? That are they going to be, I presume they'll be redeployed somewhere else? But that obviously will leave a bit of a gap where, hopefully a small gap where they have to leave the service where they perhaps have been for several years. And I just wondered how we're going to fill that gap from elsewhere in the organisation, and basically how big a problem that might be. It might be only a very small issue, but just perhaps, rather than percentages, perhaps put it in terms of number of people, terms of staff.
Thanks, Peter. Who would like to answer that? Take that.
Can I ask Lynn to do that? Because we did put something in last month's report, but I think it's a good question, because obviously we're constantly having a discussion about it. But Lynn, I think your team are on with that, aren't they?
Yes, so thank you for the question. So obviously what we have done operationally is absolutely assess the position in relation to vaccinated and unvaccinated staff, for all of those who would fit that criteria for either, as you say, Granville Court is considered a residential home anyway. So all staff in that service would be required to be vaccinated or meet the criteria to be exempt. So I can assure you, Peter, it's a very, very small number of staff. I'm talking about one or two here as well. So in terms of the operational sustainability of the service, we are confident that that's not going to impact as it stands at the moment. And obviously those conversations are taking place, as you would expect, with those staff. And if we need to, then obviously we are looking to redeploy. But I can assure you that Granville Court, we can manage that in the current staffing that we have available to us. We've assessed it as well around all of those staff across our community services, both our physical community services in Scarborough, Ryedale and Whitby, and our mental health services in the community that need to in-reach into care homes. So as it stands currently, having done that piece of work, having looked at that across all of those staff, then we are confident that we can continue to deliver the capacity that we need into care homes as a consequence of that piece. Obviously, we'll have to keep it under continual review. In terms of the future as well, it means that obviously vaccination status will be something that we look at point of recruitment as well, to make sure that we're in a good place to address that going forward. There is a broader question, obviously, that's being consulted upon nationally, which I'm sure Pete will comment on whether that position actually is made applicable to all staff. But obviously we will await the outcome of that. But again, lots of discussion in the media about that this week.
Thanks, Lynn. Dean.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was just going to pick up on Lynn's point, first of all, when she said that she'd given a negative update, and I don't think it was a negative update, Lynn. I think it was a positive update in the sense that you were being honest about the pressures that the organisation is facing, and that's very similar to many organisations in the NHS. And I think the positive thing was that you were talking about the work that's going on to prepare the organisation for those pressures as they go forward over the coming months. And I think that sort of honest account is how we build trust with the public, that we see those things coming and we prepare accordingly to the best of our ability. So thank you for that. I didn't think it was negative in the round on that. And then secondly was just a sort of observation really, was that despite those pressures, that some important work has continued to happen, hasn't it? So it was great to see in terms of flu jab uptake higher than it was this time last year. Again, important in terms of planning for that winter resilience, and likewise, Steve, in terms of staff survey uptake being sort of higher than it was last year in that. And then finally, it was also good to see the progress on the white ribbon, the violence against women and girls a sort of year on. And it seems now, doesn't it, sort of prescient that we'd signed up to that when there's been so much in the press about it in terms of education services and police services and the wider public service. So despite all those pressures, that programme of work that Hilary and the team have put in, I think sort of really important, again, giving us that sort of resilience and understanding for the future. So thank you for the report, Michelle.
Thank you, Dean. Peter, you've still got your hand up. Did you have another question? Okay, I can't see anybody else. Hope I haven't missed anybody. So thanks very much for that report. And I have to say I was very pleased about the Right Care, Right Person work and that's going live shortly, but also further on in the report, what sounds like some similar work happening with the Yorkshire Ambulance Service too, which I think is really welcome. So thank you everybody for that. We'll move on then to the publications and policy highlights, item number 8. Michelle?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Again, this is being circulated for people. It's all the major publications that have come out, the relevant director lead, and what we're doing in an organisation. Not very much this month. Majorly, obviously, the operational planning guidance. I know that's been discussed in thick. I don't know if Pete wants to mention anything particularly about that, but it's just there for information, Chair, and any questions.
Thank you. Pete, did you want to add anything, or should we just go to any questions?
I think we'll cover the planning guidance a little bit later on the agenda, Chair, when we get to the assurance reports. It's probably appropriate there. So if we go straight to questions.
Thanks very much. Any questions or comments? No, I can't see anybody on that. So that's received and noted. We move on then to the performance report, and it's over to you, Pete.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the usual performance report we bring to board. It's our half-year performance stocktake with performance reported to the end of September. Colleagues will see from the front sheet we've included commentary for those areas which fall outside of normal variation. I think I should also draw board's attention to the fact that at EMT we did review the shading of the report which we introduced to identify the start of the pandemic, and given current activity levels and impacts from COVID, we agreed it was appropriate to remain shaded but keep that under review. Before I say anything further, I think if I bring Lynn in to talk about waiting times, then it'll be appropriate to go to questions, Chair.
Thank you, Pete. Lynn?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So obviously our focus continues around waiting times. You'll see from the data that unfortunately there was a rise in this period in the overall CAMS waiting list. So that's not directly in relation to ASD. Our positive work continues in terms of that area. I guess what's underlying that position is whilst CAMS overall referrals and activity plateaued through August and early September, and they have plateaued at a higher than level rate for this period of time, and the level of complexity and acuity amongst the new referrals into that service remains high as well. So it does mean that in terms of responding to that demand, that need, obviously that does put pressure on our sort of available staffing resource. We're continuing to work hard at that. We do have vacancies in those services, so we're working hard on recruitment too. But one of the consequences specifically around the really focused work around autism diagnosis is when we've clinically reviewed those service users waiting, and we're now really focused actually all the over 52-week waits we've assessed. There's processes in place for those, so we're really now concentrating on those waiting over 18 weeks. Having done that, there is a number of young people who actually probably require diagnosis in terms of ADHD. not ASD. So obviously there's some clinical adjustments taking place. That therefore reflects in the waiting times. So we have seen a rise in the number of service users waiting for ADHD as opposed to ASD. No waits are good, obviously, and we're continuing to address that. So the focus as well is on how we reduce the ADHD waiting times, which is why I think it's really important to have noted already in our conversations today the developments which will come into effect in January, which is the new service across Hull and East Riding. They really will put that sort of different approach around how we address those neurodiversity needs going forward. Up until now, the only option has been placement onto an ADHD waiting time list or onto an ASD list. I think what really matters in terms of the new pathway is that people will get sort of seen and triaged early, and actually diagnosis is one step, but it's the support that's really important, and access to that support early as well, obviously in terms of sort of further prevention of challenging needs further down the line. So again, we're working between sort of our current system and that new system that's coming on stream in January as well. So I'm disappointed to report that the CAMS waiting time particularly is showing some increase, but again, that is in part as a consequence of the really sort of detailed, robust work that we've been doing. So I hope that provides, Chair, a sort of explanation of where we are. With that, again, we've got a number of mechanisms in place where these waiting lists get addressed at individual patient level on a weekly basis as well. And obviously, often we're very much in contact with the families and the young people, and we don't just wait for them to reach the top of the list. We are in contact with them, and if need be, if their needs are increasing, then obviously we will expedite their contact as well. So as part of our ongoing sort of work around waiting times. So I'll pause there, but happy to answer obviously any questions.
Thanks, Lynn. So I can see Mike Smith.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Lynn. It must feel at times like, to use the Yorkshire expression, you're plaiting fog with all of the different things that are hitting you. Having said that, Lynn, these are still individual patients, as you've highlighted, and you're keeping in contact with them. So it's a complex situation, lack of staff, perhaps some inappropriate referrals, perhaps some commissioning issues. If you had a magic wand and a couple of wishes, what would we do to actually pin this down?
It's a really good question, Mike. I think ultimately the magic wand primarily is what the system has now co-produced and designed that will come into effect in January. So that will take some time to sort of bed into a system, but that is absolutely the right thing to do. So I'm really pleased that we've really participated. In fact, we're sort of going to lead the introduction of that service for the system as well. I think that's really important for us. So meanwhile, Mike, if I could sort of magic up more staff who are competent and able to diagnose both autism and ADHD, I would do that. Unfortunately, it is a particular sort of clinical skill as well, and one that's really important that we get right, and that we need to ensure that when we're diagnosing those disorders that's taking place in a clinically robust way. So we are still undertaking a number of approaches to improve that. So we've got new staff undertaking training in relation to being able to diagnose as well. So, however, Mike, if those staff were out there with that skill and competency, believe you me, we would have them. But I think, unfortunately, we're not alone in this. It's it's a nationally sort of reflected problem as well. So I'd like to say if I had the money, Mike, we could do more, but actually I don't think this is so much about money. I mean, money is part of it, but it really is about having the skill with the knowledge, the staff with the knowledge and experience to work in this area.
Thank you, Lynn. Francis, you're on mute.
First time today. So mine's not on this particular area, it's on something else. So I don't know if you want to do anything else before I bring in my questions, or on general questions yet.
Any other questions on the waiting times? Michelle, you've got your hand up there, Michelle.
Yeah, just to a systems perspective, just that Lynn touched on it, and obviously Lynn mentioned the system lead work that we're doing, but we are continuing to escalate, particularly CAMS in general, but certainly waiting list initiatives and the elective recovery. And trying to put it on the same footing as the elective recovery in relationship to acute services. So we're doing a piece of work around numbers. We're also looking at how, because we have got some resources, but as Lynn alluded to, it's skills and it's qualifications. So one of the things that we are looking at is seeing if what else and the art of the possible is with the voluntary sector and third sector more. We already utilise that sector quite a lot, but is there more that we can be doing in the system, as it were? We've also, and I think we're probably the first area that has done it, developed a great dashboard in relationship to CAMS in general, but also about waiting times as well. So when we've just refined that a little bit more, and it's been signed off by partner organisations, I'll bring it to the board and you can have a look at that. But it is a national issue. There's also some national work going on as well about the elective recovery, but also about how we maximise the resources that we've got a bit more from a national perspective, because regions are just pushing other regions into other issues as well. And obviously the education piece, we're starting to talk closer to the Department of Education. But I'll leave it there. It is a major issue.
Thanks, Michelle. Francis.
Yeah, I had two areas. The first one was on the safer staffing dashboard, which maybe I've beaten Peter to it this time, and just looking at that and just kind of correlating the obviously the safer staffing full rates in terms of registered is looking slightly worrying. You then look at the OBDs where again there's quite a few looking slightly worrying, and then you cross-reference that with the sickness levels. And there seems to be a consistent pattern in a number of places. And I know you do talk about it on the next page, and we will be getting the safer staffing review soon. But I just wondered if anybody could pick up on that, because it's a picture that's we've not seen so strongly before in the past.
Thanks, Francis. Who'd like to pick up on that, please?
Shall
Dee. Oh.
Yeah, shall I pick that up?
Sure.
Yes, Francis, I agree. When I saw it, I was concerned. Obviously, it's painting that picture of August. Some staff on leave, some non-COVID related sickness, but also it was the time when staff were getting pinged by the app, having to self-isolate. So we've got the sickness there. It is concerning. Obviously, we've put that extra sheet in, as you can see this time, which gives some explanation behind it. So some of the things that aren't being pulled through onto the demand template because it's not still set up that way, where we've got full-time OTs working on the unit, which are in the safer staffing numbers, but not being pulled through into this dashboard. Obviously, that work is ongoing, and we hope to get that finished soon. Band 7s are covering, matrons are covering, doing twilights, doing shifts to keep it safe. Because the first thing I do when I look at that and see the fill rates is look at the care hours per patient day, which apart from I think Westlands dropped slightly is good. So those care hours per patient day is good. So that gives me assurance there. We can see as well that the clinical supervision, we've got more reds there, which you would expect would happen because of the sickness, but I can give some assurances. We've just got this month's clinical supervision report, and with the exception of one unit, everybody's back up there again. So it's been an August blip, some of this, but I think we're going to have to get ourselves ready and used to this, where it's going to look this way. And it's again about how Lynn and I are working with these teams to make sure that we are mitigating any risks caused by safer staffing, particularly as we go into winter, and the winter pressures that we've just described there. The end column, no reds flagging again, gives me some assurance. You know, sometimes we get an odd one there popping in, don't we, where we've got the 5, which flags the red. So what we've sort of held the position. It has been extremely difficult. Staff are tired. We've got sickness, we've got vacancies. I've just signed off for another 8 visas for our international recruits, which are a bit of a fix, you know, almost an immediate fix once we've got them in and they're working. They're a bit more immediate than some of the longer term plans we've got around workforce. Our new international recruits will be starting next week in their posts, so they'll be up at Malton. And one in primary care and one at Granville. So again, that will help the situation. But I think it shows that this dashboard works for me because it felt like that at that time. and we were on it and making sure that we were getting the cover there. So yeah, I think it does what it says on the tin, the dashboard. It gives us that warning that things aren't right, and it reflects what was going on in August. And I think, you know, it's the dashboard that I know Lynn and I will be absolutely focusing on as we go forward. But obviously it's after the event. I know Lynn meets regularly with the ops teams and is constantly dealing with safer staffing issues, as indeed my team get involved as well.
I'd agree with you, Hilary. It's a great warning flag, and probably we need to take on board what the comment that John normally makes, that don't look at 1 month in isolation, look for a trend. So,
yeah.
So it's a warning, and maybe using John's approach, we need just to see that it's not a trend going forward. The other one from me was just referral to treatment, which obviously then presumably will have a knock-on effect on the waiting time. So referral to treatment on page 73 continues to fall away in terms of how fast we're doing that, and obviously that's not good. But then if we were doing all the referrals treatments, it might then have a negative impact on the waiting times, Lynn. So it's just a balance between the two.
Lynn, did you want to comment on that from Francis?
Yeah, and obviously I think that's just another chart that demonstrates and underpins what I was saying about the overall position, Francis, around waiting times.
Yeah.
So unfortunately that increase in the CAMs obviously impacts that referral to treatment overall position as well. So if that gets better, then that chart will improve as well. So obviously it's all interconnected for the reasons that I say. But again, really, you know, underpins why our focus around waiting times continues. The Deputy Chief Operating Officer obviously focuses, you know, much of her week actually on, you know, really talking to each of the areas in depth at patient level data, as I say. So we really understand exactly where those lists are moving to on a week by week basis. So agree with you, you know, it's not going where we would want it to be, but for all of the reasons that I've discussed, you know, get that bit right and moving, then, you know, we should see that improvement in that chart too.
Thanks, Lynn. Is that right, Francis?
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Peter.
Thanks, Caroline, and thanks, Francis, for asking about the dashboard, which I normally do, but I've just perhaps got one slight follow-up on, because Hilary mentioned Westlands there about the clinical hours per patient per day being low, and it's also on the Westlands, when you look at it, it's almost 100% full in August. I know you know, that since then it's probably come down. I'm not quite sure, but you've got the high sickness levels. I know they've had a COVID outbreak. Basically, has the position at Westlands improved since August? We're now obviously well into October, and have any patients which have had to be placed out of area been repatriated?
Hilary, on mute.
Sorry, I think Lynn, you've probably got more up-to-date position around Westlands with meeting with ops regularly. Do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, so Peter, we've had high occupancy and the inpatient wards have been high in their overall occupancy over the last couple of weeks. Actually, I've just reduced our OPAL level today to OPAL 2 from OPAL 3, and we've been consistently at OPAL 3 for the last 2 weeks because those pressures not only in Westlands. So the position has improved, but it's a very variable position at the moment. Unfortunately, obviously, this IBR as well shows that there was a rise, particularly in adult out of area placements, back to that August position where we did have 2 acute wards closed for periods because of infection control, COVID related reasons, obviously, and higher number of COVID patients. Pleased to report, haven't seen the report today, Hilary, but yesterday we've finally got back to 0 COVID positive patients in our inpatient beds. So again, demonstrates that the pressure has improved somewhat. And for the reasons that Hilary said, you know, we did have leave in August. We encouraged our staff to take leave. So that position has improved to some degree as well. But demand, unfortunately, is still high at the moment. So for the reasons that Hilary says, we really continue to work really hard to make sure that our wards are safely staffed. I meet with the teams 3 times a week actually to look at staffing per se particularly. So, and you know, we do manage to make it safely covered. Obviously we wouldn't be satisfied if that was not the case. However, operational managers and matrons, you know, are working exceptionally hard around staffing. It's the absolute key focus for us at the moment, but acuity has slightly reduced, Peter, at the minute, but given, you know, I guess my overview about pressures and winter, I expect that, you know, unfortunately it probably will rise again, but at the minute it has reduced.
Thanks, Lynn. Michelle?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, it's a good question. It relates back to what we were talking about earlier on in relationship to system pressures and general pressures, and we're going to see that continuing, and that's why it's good to have that open conversation next time. Just to remind the board that we have got a very low bed base to start off with, which is positive because we have got a really good community infrastructure, and we've got a very good process through those beds. If you remember, it's something that's been awarded a bit of national conversation last year, particularly on utilisation of beds. I know that they all look high, the occupancy, but actually when you compare that to other organisations, it's actually relatively stable, which I know it's not good for us, but from an outlier point of view. So it's always useful just to note that. We have got bed continuity plans in place which staff can utilise, but also it comes back to Hilary's point about the care per person per day as well, and looking at it in the rounded picture. It is very important, but we are going to see our occupancy fluctuate. I've just got the regional data through on outer area bed placements, and ours have reduced the most over the last 2 months, which is really positive. And obviously with Maester coming on stream now and that great development there, we anticipate that they will go down even further. So it's just a word of caution about winter, but it's also just a bit about the positivity and the flow that we've got, and the community infrastructure, which is also under real pressure and strain. We see the inpatient here, but obviously there are pressures in the community as well, which we need just to be mindful of, which I know that we are. I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Michelle. I don't see any other hands up. I think from the contributions that have been made, it might be worth thinking about at an appropriate board meeting. I don't know whether that would be November or January, to maybe do as has been raised in the conversation about maybe having a little look at some comparisons and overview between some of the different reports, and maybe sort of, you know, take on board the points you've made, Michelle, about context. But just see about this issue about whether there's a trend emerging. I think it's really difficult because, you know, you have the holidays in summer and then you hit the winter. So I'm sure these things are different, but it might be worth sort of thinking about having a chance to look at across some months to see what might be happening, if that's if the board thinks that's a good idea. Yeah. Okay, let's take that forward and decide whether the next board meeting or maybe January might be a better one to do that work. So thank you everyone for that. We'll move on then to the finance report. Pete.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the finance report which takes us to the end of the H1 planning period. It would be remiss of me not to remind everybody that for that planning period we operated on a block funding arrangement. Some of the key headlines from the report, Chair, before we go to questions, are for H1 we have ended with a financial position consistent with what the ICS has asked of us, so that's really positive. Our COVID expenditure and income top up for the H1 period totaled 3.7 million, and our cash in bank remained stable at around 24 million. The H2 planning guidance has come out, and I know we touched on this earlier, and I'm sure we'll pick that up later on the agenda today. So happy to stop there and take any questions.
Thanks, Pete. Any questions? Mike.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just want to connect this with a previous conversation. On page 93, we've still got very high vacancies in mental health. Even though some of them are being covered by agency staff, if there's an underspend, it does imply that per se there are vacancies there. Now, it's a pretty intractable problem as we've found nationally, but just flying a kite for a second, I'm just wondering what scope there is in terms of growing our own and actually investing in some specific recruitment for people who are capable of working in these areas, rather than people who actually do work in these areas, even if it's at cost to the trust. So that's my kite flown.
Thanks, Mike. Who would like to take that?
Steve, would you want to pick that up? Because we're always having conversations about, we do quite a bit of that already, Mike. But Steve, do you want to just give us a bit of an update?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's a very good question, Mike, in the sense that how much scope is there? There's more scope, I think, that we could do around that. Absolutely. And as an EMT, we actually had a discussion, quite a detailed discussion around that on Monday, about what potential we've got to grow what we do. So as Michelle says, we already do that. We already have pathways. What we need to do is say, how can we maximise that? Interestingly, Francis and Caroline, we were on a call yesterday with one of the units who were saying, but there's only so many students and people in training you can support. So what we need to do is find that balance between providing as many development opportunities to grow our own with our staff, but not compromising operational's ability to provide their services. So there'll be a point, won't there, where we can get that balance right. I think we've got a bit of work, Mike, to do around that. So we can look to push the boundary as much as possible on it, so that we give as many and we grow as many of our own, but we don't get to the point where Lynn and her teams are feeling that we've kind of gone too far. So short answer is yes, there's scope to do some more. We do something, there's scope to do more, and we've got some plans to do that over the coming weeks.
Thank you, Steve. Dean.
It was a similar area really about agency spend, and this might be something better to pick up in maybe finance and workforce committees, but for the first time we've edged over the spend compared to last year on agency, haven't we, this year? And just looking at some of the trends, I mean, there's some areas like clinical support staff and admin and clerical where you might say that seems a little bit odd, although it's not great expenditure compared to the labour market, where you might expect the odd occasion, but there's regular use of both those. And you know, whether we can have a look at those sorts of areas, although relatively little spend compared to all. And then also the expenditure having gone up in September compared to July and August, where you might have expected it to be higher because of holidays coming through, and whether there is a need really just to do one of those sort of focused pieces again on how many of those, you know, we can convert either into bank or substantive staff to start managing that before it sort of starts to creep up on us again. But Caroline, may be more appropriate to pick some of that up in Finance Committee and Workforce Committee, perhaps.
Thanks, Dean, but thanks for raising that today. Any more questions or comments? Okay, I can't see it. So thank you for that. That's received and noted. We move on then to the Finance, and it's Francis, Finance and Investment Committee Assurance Report. Francis.
Thanks, Caroline. Really good meeting. Had a really very good meeting at the last one. I won't cover huge amounts because Pete's covered most of the trust stuff in his report. All I'll pick out are a couple of areas. So you can see the Humber Coast and Vale positive performance is in there. Picking up on Dean's point, we did have a discussion around workforce from a financial perspective rather than from a workforce and quality perspective, and we're looking to do a deep dive on that at our next meeting in December. So Pete and the team are working on that with Steve, and we've asked if Steve and John can join us for that discussion. We had a good discussion around primary care, and you can see that if you mark it Wheaton temporarily, that the performance has been pretty good, and the emerging of some of the primary care has worked really well for us. BRS continues to go well, and the teams continue to produce that even in the difficult times we've got. And we had a look at the capital programme. We had an update on that, and you can see that whilst we haven't spent a huge amount of it, there is a lot in the pipeline, as you saw from Rob's presentation earlier, and it's the normal hockey stick approach where it suddenly ramps up post Christmas into January, February, March. Those are the key points I bring out, Chair. Happy to take any questions. Pete, is there anything you want to add?
No, Francis, I think you've covered most of the key points.
Thanks very much, Francis. Any questions or comments? No? Thank you for that. And just to say that Francis and I think it's worth saying that the New Bridges visit, we had a really very good discussion about the transformation that bringing the pharmacy services in-house was making, both in terms of service delivery, working across workforce teams with different specialisms, but also music, I think, to Francis's ears, saving some money on the medicines as well, Francis, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm going to say, Chair, it was Wayne that was on the call, and it was a fantastic example of almost quality improvement in terms of better outcome for patients, in terms of earlier discharge from the ward because of what was going on, better control of the medicine stock, better use of the medicine stock, you know, and the charge nurse that we had on there said it was working fantastically well for them. So as Wayne put it, it was a win-win-win-win-win. Yeah, and we thought that would be a perfect story to come to the board at a later date, but also to be picked up at the relevant subcommittees as well. It was good to hear. Okay, so moving on then, we go to Peter Barron with the Humber Coast and Vale Specialised Mental Health, Learning Disability and Autism Provider Collaborative Committee report.
Okay,
over to you,
thank
Peter.
you. That's a tongue twister, isn't it, Caroline? But thank you.
I know, just for those listening and watching.
But actually, one of the things that we decided is would just be called the collaborative committee from from the September meeting onwards, and the September meeting was only 6 days after I think we had quite a detailed board discussion on this, so there wasn't too much new there. We did approve the appointment of what's called a free champion on eating disorders. We got some external funding there, I think of £35,000. So it's for the short term, it's no cost to us. So a champion there has been or is being appointed. Update on the partnership agreement. Everybody signed the partnership agreement except for Leeds York NHS Trust. And that there's no problem with them. They just want one or two documents, including a three-year plan, which I think Peter's has already got in hand. So that will be approved by them very, very soon. We heard in that time out about the financial due diligence and the extra 1.23 million from the enhanced packages of care, which has helped us to square that one off. So that was good. And the commissioning team, as noted there, has slightly changed its name as well. So a fairly minor change to note to the board. I don't think there's anything else. We've got another meeting tomorrow, so I'll also update the board next month on that.
Thanks, Peter. Any questions or comments to Peter? No, thank you, Peter. That's received and noted. Moving on to Pete Beckwith, charitable funds accounts. I think, or is that Peter Barron?
I think it's me, Chair.
Okay, sorry, Pete.
So thank you, Chair. So these are the accounts that were reviewed at the last Charitable Funds Committee and were supported, subject to some minor amendments which will be in action. I think there's 2 points I probably need to draw out. First is a point of clarity that the accounts are unaudited, but they have been independently examined, which is absolutely fine given the level of turnover and size of charitable funds. The second is, and it's an error on my point, Chair, they are brought here today for approval. However, the recommendation should be that as a board, we approve acting as the corporate trustee to approve the accounts. And there's a wee bit of wording within the body of the document that we just need to re-emphasise that the board is acting as the corporate trustee, which if the board are happy to sign off the accounts, I will get updated prior to submission. Happy to stop there unless Peter Barron wants to add anything.
Thanks for that, Pete. Peter Barron?
Nothing else. No, I think the accounts speak for themselves. It was a good year for income, and we spent most of it as well. So, but there's some work to do in the current year, obviously, as we talked about in the last board meeting.
Thanks very much. Any questions or comments? No. Well, with that amendment that Pete Beckwith outlined in terms of approval and who's doing it and the context, is that approved by the board as corporate trustees? Yes, thank you very much. I think at this point it'd be worth just taking a short comfort break for about let's say just after 11. If we'll come back then, and we've got Alison at 11 ready to take us through the Freedom to Speak Up update. So if we could take a break and stop streaming. back, everybody, to the Trust Board public meeting, and welcome to those who are watching today. I'm Caroline Flint, the Trust Chair. So next on our agenda, we have Alison Flack, who is going to take us through a Freedom to Speak update. Welcome, Alison.
Thank you, Caroline. Morning, everybody. So this is the Freedom to Speak Guardians update to the board for today. Before I start, I don't know, Michelle, as the executive lead for Speak Up, is there anything you wanted to raise?
My apologies, Michelle, for not bringing you in there. Sorry about that.
No worries at all, Chair. No, just to say thanks to Alison and the Guardians. Obviously, it's a difficult time during the pandemic, but they've continued to progress, and we have raised the profile of Freedom to Speak Up. So we do constantly, you know, as Alison will touch on, keep communicating about the Freedom to Speak Up. I'm the executive lead because I'm really sort of passionate about that role and about staff and given the access to being able to speak up. But I'll pass over to Alison to take you through the key points of the latest update.
Thanks,
and
Michelle.
thanks to Peter
Over to you,
well,
Alison.
and yourself.
Thank you. And just to introduce Nikki, who I see has just joined us, Nikki Titchener is our Deputy Speak Up Guardian. So welcome, Nikki, to the board as well. I thought it'd be helpful for Nikki to come along. So the first thing I want to say, obviously, I've provided a paper that's I'm hoping is self-explanatory. I'll just take everyone through the highlights of that. The first thing just to say is wanted to raise that it is Speak Up Month. October is Speak Up Month, and Nikki's done a great job in doing a number of virtual pop-in sessions for our staff, and it was great to see that Michelle and Peter, as our non-exec independent director, was able to join one of those. So we continue to raise the profile of Speak Up and the Guardian's role across the Trust, and many of you will have seen myself and Nikki's face pop up on the desktop this week as well, just to continue to raise that through whatever communications means that we can. Our strategy, there's sort of three things I think really to highlight. Our strategy that we developed with our staff and staff side colleagues and staff governors is due for refresh. So Nikki and I will be working on that with our colleagues over the next couple of months to bring the refresh strategy to the December Trust Board. And in line with that, we're also reviewing the Speak Up policy, which Nikki has done some work on, which then aligns with the National Guardian's best practice for the policy and procedure. So it's been quite helpful, I think, just check in with that as well. You'll see from the paper that Dr. Henrietta Hughes, who was the National Guardian, has stepped down, and there's a recruitment process underway to replace to her successor. And there was a recent case review that's been undertaken by the National Guardian's Office that we have just received in relation to Blackpool teaching hospitals, and myself and Nikki will be looking at that to see what actions need to be taken or what best practice, and we will be bringing that back to Trust Board colleagues. In terms of local reporting, the position from 1st of April to the 31st of September, you'll see that we've had 15 concerns raised through Speak Up. Predominantly, those have been sort of individuals, either through bullying, harassment or HR type of grievances. So we do have now a good pathway into colleagues to provide support from an HR perspective. And where there's further work to do with that's what we're doing. The numbers that you'll see over the last 3 years are the full year numbers. So it's just to give you a little bit of a comparison, because when I went back and checked my paper, I thought, oh, that could be a little bit misleading. So just to say they're the full numbers for each of those financial years. We do continue to have regular meetings with Michelle as the exec director. And we have had our first meeting with Caroline in her new role as chair, and Peter Barron. So that's helpful on a quarterly basis. And I think just the fact that we're here again today demonstrates the commitment of all of the board to speaking up and how seriously they take it. I did just want to flag two things in addition, really. The on a recent speak up that we had some feedback from the staff member that they would have felt perhaps more supported if they had somebody almost like a buddy that was supporting them through the system. And obviously we play that role as guardians, but I think it's just somebody that they wanted to maybe have a catch up with, or just to speak, not necessarily about the detail of the case, but just how they were feeling and just a little bit more support. And obviously we have our occupational health colleagues, but it was something a bit more lighter touch than that. So we will be piloting some sort of role within our Speak Up, and we're going to be meeting with our colleagues in HR to look at how they might support that as well. So it is very much at the early stages, and the reason I really wanted to flag it is just because we say, well, what happens after Speak Up when we get any feedback from staff, and I think that's a good example of how we're going to take something forward and have a look at it. We will be replacing Alex Saxby, who is the other Deputy Guardian, who's recently left the team. So we will be recruiting to a replacement to just give us some additional capacity within the team. And I think that's probably the highlights that I wanted to raise. Thank you, Caroline. Nikki, is there anything you wanted to flag while you're here?
Just to add about the popularity of the drop-ins, really, I think they've gone really well, and that's got the cogs in my brain sort of thinking about how we maybe continue with that. So I've been thinking about the possibility of us having a regular sort of surgery type thing. So I'm wondering about us doing that and maybe having one dotted around the trust on a monthly basis at least to keep the profile up on a regular basis. So that's all I really wanted to, and I haven't had a chance to speak to you about that yet, Alison, but
no, that's fine, and that sounds an excellent idea, and I can see people smiling and nodding.
Keep that going, because there's every time we've had one of the drop-ins, people have come forward. So I think it's something that maybe we could advertise regularly and keep that profile high. So that's all I wanted to add.
Thanks, Nikki.
Thanks, Alison. Thanks, Nikki. Are there any questions or comments? John, I can see your hand up. John Byrne.
Thanks, Alison. Alison, just for clarity, is this an annual report or an update? Is an annual report?
It's like a quarterly. We do sort of quarterly six monthly updates. It's not the annual report, John.
Okay, so this is just a 6 monthly update. Okay, thank you, Alison.
Thank you, Hanif.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to thank you for the report, Alison. Great to hear about the work. I was just wondering if there's a pattern emerging at all from what you've seen that we as non-execs may be able to take into account as we're moving forward. We've already previously discussed at this meeting earlier the impact of COVID, which is obviously well documented. But is it still fairly ad hoc in terms of what's coming across, or are you seeing a particular pattern?
I think it probably is. I think, if anything, the sort of where we've been getting the most of the sort of people contacting us with their concerns is in relation to sometimes feeling sort of bullying and harassment, but it seems like it's isolated cases or to do with individuals' own employment circumstances. So I think that's where we've got the good link in with our colleagues in HR, and also staff side reps, where people are in sort of unions and are getting support from their staff side. So we're not seeing any real patterns. We've seen a couple of things where Michelle has sort of said, can you have a bit more of a look and a bit more of a triangulation, and just get a little bit of a pattern, see if there is a pattern of what's going on. But we haven't seen anything of particular concern. And out of all of those, there isn't anything that I would say has a direct, is a real direct input on patient safety. I'm not saying that there might not be further down the line, but there isn't at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Alison. Thanks, Hanif, for that question. Any other questions? No, I just wondered, Alison and Nikki, whether, I'm sure you probably have, but whether you've had any discussions with the BAME network, because just thinking back to a session that I think you were on that one as well, Hanif, it was quite interesting, some of the staff raising some of the issues that they faced and about support for them in sometimes difficult situations. Is that something that's integrated into your work?
It definitely is, Caroline, and it's quite timely because Grace Garver, who chairs the BAME network, has been in touch with me this week just to see how we can work more closely together. But we have also had meetings with the Trust's Equality and Diversity lead just to see what additional work we can have, and we have had concerns raised in terms of some of the race discrimination, which we've been able to focus on and improve. And I know that Lynn has picked this up within the operational areas as well to look at additional training and support for staff.
Have you got a glass of water there, Alison?
Yeah, no.
Have a sip. Don't be shy. Have a sip. That's it.
And obviously we've got the advert out for the other Guardian, and obviously we're positively looking at is that diversity angle as well. So we're trying to cover different bases, but yeah, good point.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Alison and Nikki. And we've got an item later on the agenda around the Safeguarding Adults review, which I think again is part and parcel connected to the work you do as well. So thank you very much for your contribution today. Look forward to the next update.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alison
Thank
and
you,
Nikki.
everybody.
Thanks, Nikki. Nice to see you. Thanks, Alison.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much. Moving on to item 15, Constitution, Michelle Hughes to present.
Thank you, Chair. So following board approval of the go live date of assuming lead provider responsibilities, some updates are required to our constitution to reflect this. 3 quite straightforward updates are proposed that are detailed in the report, and they are namely in relation to adding a description of the trust principal purpose to reflect the provision of commissioning functions. An additional clause being added under powers to state that the board has delegated responsibility from NHS England for the commissioning and contract quality and safety oversight of the contracts. And lastly, to describe the Director of Finance role for the Trust commissioning responsibilities. One point to note that was clarified to governors when this was presented is that there is no change in relation to significant transactions, as surplus income will be distributed to other service providers through commissioning arrangements. So the role of the Council of Governors in any significant transaction remains unchanged. As board will be aware, any change to the constitution requires the approval of both the Council of Governors and the Trust Board, and these proposals are being presented today after approval by the Council, who approved them on the 7th of October. So the 3 changes are presented for approval.
Thank you, Michelle. I see Dean has his hand up. Dean.
Thank you, Chair. And apologies if I missed this at the Council of Governors. Very happy to support it. I suppose I just couldn't understand the one about the needing to change the Director of Finance one. Because surely that would be in the gift of us as the board to determine who is the most appropriate executive director to do that. And if we change it, it may be at some point in the future people think, I don't know, a director of strategy or that we appoint maybe the most appropriate director. Maybe I've missed something along the way, and as I say, it's not a significant point, but I just wonder if that was needed.
Thanks, Dean. Michelle?
Fair point. Is it needed? It gives absolute clarity, and your point about any future change of lead for the commissioning role would require a tweak. I mean, it's a board decision if we want to leave that out and put it in if the roles change, but for now it just simply provides clarity. But I'll open it to board for a decision. Michelle, you've got your hands up.
Michelle?
Yeah, it's a really good point, actually, and given some of the discussions that I'm not obviously going to go into at the moment, it might be helpful just to do as Dean suggested and make a minor amendment and inform the governors. But I'm open to the board's obviously suggestion, but it's quite a sensible suggestion.
Okay, unless there's any other comments on this, I think we should take on board Dean's suggestion.
So just to be clear, Chair, are we removing that 3rd change? And if so, I will have to inform the governors and get them to approve. Okay,
is that what you wanted, Dean, exactly, or did you want an amendment?
Yeah, as I say, it's not something I was going to get hung up about, Caroline. If it's just easy to accept it, it just seemed that it's within our gift, isn't it, to appoint the executive lead to the commissioning thing, and makes perfect sense at this time for that to be the Director of Finance. At some point in the future, we may have a different view, and we'd have to change the constitution if we do that at that time. But if it's more complicated to change it with the governors, then I'm not, it's not a hill that I need to die on, if you see what I mean.
Advice, Michelle Hughes?
It can go either way, Chair. I mean, it's a lot easier to leave it in and give that clarity. If we do need to change it with change of roles in the future, it will be a one-line request to board to make that minor amendment to the Constitution.
Okay, thanks for that, Michelle. I think from that, I think we should take the proposal as it stands, but we can have it minuted. The point raised about, look, we're in an environment of some changings and going on and discussion. So I think if we can just note that in the minutes, the point Dean's made, we can come back in the future. And that means that obviously the Council of Governors are alerted to the points we've raised today, that we might want to come back and have the opportunity to change that down the road. So with that taken on board, are we all happy to approve this report? Great, lovely, thank you. Michelle Hughes again, external review of governance.
So this is the update that was promised, Chair, and further to previous updates to board, an external provider has now been secured to undertake an independent review of our governance. And as board are aware, this is required as per NHS guidance and must be carried out with a maximum of 5 years. And for us, this means by May next year. So following evaluation of bid submissions, Grant Thornton has been selected. The project mobilisation will begin in December with feedback and reporting in March. The review will consist of 2 key phases: planning and field work and feedback and reporting. And attached as Appendix 1 is an outline of what those phases will contain. Structured interviews, workshops and observation of Trust Board meetings and key committees will form a key part of the review. Fieldwork, as I say, will start in the new year, and a number of information requests have just now been received and will be collated. One of the key information requests is a board self-assessment against Care Quality Commission 8 key lines of inquiries, and the board already have plans to do this at its time out in December. So the detail is in the report, Chair, and hopefully that gives an overview of what's about to commence.
Thanks very much, Michelle. Any comments or questions? No. Let's receive and note that report. Thank you very much, Michelle. Moving on then to the Emergency Preparedness, Resilience and Response Assurance process. Lynn.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so I'm bringing you this report in my role as Accountable Emergency Officer for the Trust. So this paper sets out, it's an annual process that we are required to undertake in relation to the Trust's self-assessment in relation to core standards in relation to EPRR. This year, as the paper describes, there have been 36 core standards that we've been required to self-assess against. Our view of that, having undertaken a rigorous process, is that we are reporting that we are overall substantively compliant. Out of the 36 standards, we are fully compliant with 33 of them and partially compliant with 3. In relation to those that we are partially compliant with, as you can see from the report, they relate to updates required as a consequence of COVID, and obviously the emergency planning, some slight changes in approach over the last year. So I'm asking the board to approve our rating of compliance in order that we can submit this to the NHS regional EPRR lead for our area as we're required to do so. But happy to answer any questions, obviously, Chair.
Thanks very much, Lynn. Any questions or comments? Mike Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I'm the EPRR lead on behalf of the NEDs, and just to let the board know 2 things. First of all, that I've been not fully involved, I've been consulted on this, and that also I lead on EPRR for another NHS trust, and that as far as I can see, we benchmark well, so I have no concerns about this. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mike. Any other questions, comments? Michelle, your hand's up. I've got on here. Moran, is that right?
No,
it's gone.
No, it's taking it
No,
down.
it's down. Okay. So if there's no other comments, do we approve this report? All in favour? Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think there was no disagreement there. We move on then to item 18. We're a little bit over time, and we have Rosie O'Connell, who's with us today. Welcome, Rosie.
Hi, thank you.
I honestly found this a really interesting report, by the way. I mean, daunting in terms of what we were having to look at our own practices against some terrible things that had happened elsewhere, but I found it really helpful. So thank you for that. And I think, Hilary, are you going to say something before Rosie presents?
I will do, yes. Yeah,
Thank
so,
you.
so Rosie's here. I don't know, Rosie, have you got your camera? You can put your camera on. Yeah, really important report, particularly for us, I think twofold really, obviously from our provider perspective, but also from the collaborative commissioning perspective. Most of the recommendations in the report at the end of the SAR are around commissioning CCGs, commissioning from NHS. And I know this is on the agenda for the collaborative committee tomorrow, so we will pick it up there as well. So we've looked at it from our own perspective, reading through the report and looking at what we've done from that, which Rosie will cover in a moment. For me, just sort of screams of not having those robust clinical governance frameworks in which I feel we've got well embedded in our organisation, and we've certainly had external feedback to that as well. But again, never to be complacent, got to keep on top of it, and always new things coming in as well to look out for. Closed cultures obviously screams out of this as well, and again, we're doing lots to work with our staff around closed cultures and our peer review processes in there looking as well. So I'm going to hand over to Rosie now. Now, Rosie is a safeguarding practitioner. If you remember the last board, we had Rachel Sharp, our head of safeguarding, who announced that she was leaving. She leaves this week, does Rachel, and we've appointed Rosie. We've interviewed a couple of weeks ago, and Rosie was successful. So Rosie will be our new head of safeguarding from Monday as well. No messing, straight into it. And no messing, straight into coming to the board as well. So we get you going straight away, don't we, Rosie? So I'm going to hand over to Rosie, who's worked with the clinical teams on looking at this report and trying to give some assurances, obviously, to the board around where we are in terms of some of the findings from this SAR.
Okay, over to you, Rosie. Can we have you on camera? I can't see you at the moment.
I should be on. I'll turn it off and on again. Can anyone see me?
I can see you, Rosie. I can see you.
There you go.
Yeah,
great.
There.
Right. Hi everyone, and thank you for allowing me to come today and present this brief. So Hillary's asked me to come today to present this brief, and it's on the SAR into Joanna, John and Ben. That was commissioned by Norfolk Safeguarding Adults Board and report released last month. The brief that you have provides a pen picture of Joanna, John and Ben and a summary of the key findings. It then goes on to explore the key learning identified for providers of health and social care and whether any of those points apply to Humber Trust. I completed it with the clinical leads and managers across the Secure Services Division and the Children's and Learning Disabilities Division, so it was a joint piece of work. So in terms of the reason why we've done this, so one of the roles of the named professional for safeguarding adults is to promote that good practice across the trust and to share any learning that could be taken from practice nationally. This includes any learning that can be taken from safeguarding adult reviews. The reason the Norfolk SAR is so relevant to us as a trust, and the reason we completed this review, is that there are, of course, similarities in terms of the people that private hospital cared for and the people we provide care for. We, as a trust, we have specialist services to support those with learning disabilities and autism, and that's both inpatient and community, and it includes supporting people with behaviours that challenge others. So it's really important that we take on any learning identified by other services about the patient groups we support. Another purpose of this review was to explore the inherent risk factors of closed culture practice, which are present in mental health inpatient services, and that's purely because of the type of care that we give and the nature of the people using the services. And it's important that we look at what's in place to mitigate those risk factors and prevent them from developing into that closed practice. So those risk factors might be the fact that we've got people in our services that are highly dependent on others for care, restrictive practices in use, people who are in care for long periods of time due to not having community placements to go into. So they are present. I'm really pleased to say that the review found a lot of good practice across the trust. They've been summarised in the brief report, and this includes effective incident reporting systems, safeguarding practice being embedded across the trust and within the divisions, close working with advocacy services. We've got a strong team of staff with specialist skills in learning disability and autism. We have a clear stance on reporting and dealing with racist abuse. We've got a robust clinical governance system, as Hilary referred to, and we've got a really, real focus on reducing restrictive interventions across services. So we have reducing restrictive intervention groups, which the patients are now part of. We've been able to get that up and running now. I think it had to be stopped due to COVID measures. And we've also got the STOMP approach, so that's stopping over medication of people with learning disabilities. That's really well embedded in the learning disability services as well. So some really good practice. In terms of the learning areas for us as a trust, you'll see in the brief that I did identify some areas that need strengthening, and they're mainly around the safeguarding training for staff members, so increasing the compliancy levels across the trust for our safeguarding training, ensuring that we can discharge patients to appropriate services, and that's partly affected by the lack of community services at the moment that we are facing. Also, the opportunity to share resources across divisions and services. So, we've got secure services and children with learning disabilities, and there's a real opportunity for us to make sure that we share those resources, so that no matter where you are in our sort of service and system, you get that right level of care. So there are some areas that need strengthening, and actually we've already made some really good progress in these areas as well. So there's, which I'm sure you're fully aware of, we really are focusing on the safeguarding training and how to increase that across the trust, and I'm quite pleased that we are making that progress. But obviously, still areas to pursue there. Does anyone have any questions on that or anything?
Mike.
Yes, thank you, Rosie. Well, welcome aboard. Rachel attended the Mental Health Legislation Committee. I hope that you're going to do the same. What I see, and I see it from this report, is a very proactive approach. We have the actual RRI figures, so we've got the quantitative data. We've also got the work that we're doing on closed cultures, so we've got the cultural stuff. But your fresh pair of eyes hopefully will take us that stage further, because as we read from this report, there are always people among staff contingents who may not be in the same place that we are. And you will do your very best, I hope, to ensure that we identify those or don't allow those behaviours to develop. So thanks very much for your report, very useful, and I'll see you next month at Mental Health Ledge.
You will. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Dean.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Rosie, and welcome to the role. I was just picking up the issue about safeguarding training, and I suppose the first point is to say that when we talk about compliance in this regard, it's people whose training may have expired rather than haven't been trained at all. So there's a regular update process in terms of safeguarding. So it doesn't mean that people haven't had any. It may mean that it's sort of out of date. However, in this area, it's one of the areas where we aren't compliant with our own standards around this in terms of what we want to do. And through the Workforce Committee, we've asked for a sort of update. I think it's at the next Workforce Committee around the non-compliant areas and what the trajectories are to bring us to compliance. So in light of this report, we'll just make sure we put a particular focus on the safeguarding, training, compliance in that next meeting. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Dean. That's interesting. Rosie, did you want to say anything to Dean's point?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously new to the role, but we've already got Rachel's really been pushing on the training level of it as well, and I've already got several meetings planned with the training department, really trying to explore and work with our practitioners around those levels and why we're not getting the attendance. We're trying to be as creative as possible to make sure that we do increase that, because obviously it's vitally important that they are trained, to support the patients we work for. So it's very much a focus of our team and will continue to be.
Absolutely. And one of the things we look at, Chair, is is it non-compliant because we've not got enough provision, or is it non-compliant because we've got enough provision but for some reason we aren't able to release people, and then how do we address the appropriate one of those, as it were?
Yeah. I mean, it came up on a visit the other day about the delays. It's actually your point about refreshing training, not completely new, and certification, was that if you have people filled up for a course and then people drop out, it means that it's hard to get other people who are on the waiting list onto those courses. And I think if the committee, the workforce, excuse me, the workforce committee is having a look at that, I think that would be really helpful. And I think the other point in the report Rosie makes is about face-to-face. Comments I've heard from staff is actually sometimes face-to-face actually is an incentive for people to come together as well. And I know we're all abiding by, obviously, is safety first in terms of COVID, but I think that's an interesting point that you raised in the report as well about the importance, if we can, getting back to some more face-to-face training on these areas. Would you agree, Rosie? It's certainly something that when we speak to practitioners, it's and when we look at feedback, it's certainly a priority that practitioners want to return to. And I've had discussions about with Hilary about this very recently as well. Okay, thank you, John.
Thanks, Chair. Look, just to say that the four most dangerous words in healthcare are "it couldn't happen here." So I think it's really important that we talk about these reports at board, because when we look back over care in our own services over the past 5-6 years, we've had some problems and challenges too. So I think it's really useful to be looking at other people's work and other people's challenges and problems, but actually just reflect that back on our own experiences. I think Hilary's right. There is something about a quality governance network which can help pick this up, but there is also something about the fugitive knowledge which relates to the cultures of organisation, which you can only pick up through listening and hearing and visiting in some services. And we do know, whether it's the Humber Centre or Town End Court, we've got some very complex and vulnerable patients in our care, and you constantly need to be aware to what issues which just may happen immediately or just may develop over a period of time, particularly with regard to closed cultures. And I just reflect back some of the things that I've seen recently have been reported really early. We've had interventions really early, and that has been based on learnings from our own Section 42, which we had a couple of years ago. So it's about learning from your previous mistakes, which is why it's positive to see this particular report at the board. I just want to highlight, it was good to hear from the responsible clinician in charge of the unit that he was aware of the report and they'd already discussed it at their own MDT in Town End Court before it had actually come to board here. So that's the kind of positive stuff you want, where people are talking about failures to learn from them, as opposed to just thinking we can transact it down. And to pick up your point, Dean, about the training, training is very important, but we know when it comes to error and harm in healthcare, sometimes compliance with training is one of the least effective things when it comes to around embedding a cultural approach to how we deal with the patient. So I'm not saying training isn't important, it is, but in terms of barriers and defences against cultural problems, it has limited effectiveness.
Thanks for that, John. Point well made. Michelle.
Yeah, picking up on that last point, I think it's about that cultural piece. I think it's a part of the jigsaw is the training piece. And funnily enough, the exec team were having a long conversation about Statman training on Monday. So we know that the working term, we know we've asked the workforce committee to do a bit of a deep dive, but we're also looking at it in accountability reviews as well at that level, because I think that's really important that we do. It is good to see this, and I asked for it to come here because I thought it would be really useful. I think, and it's about that learning, and we need to utilise as much as we can. Really positive to hear about the units already having a look at it, because I was saying the next piece is how do we filter this and embed this across the organisation, this style of learning and being ahead of the curve when reports like this come out. I also wanted to welcome Rosie. It's good to see you. Obviously, we're always up for conversations about how we can improve things and do things, and we've had this debate on and off about face-to-face versus non-face-to-face for a long time. So welcome, and it'd be interesting to get your take on that. But no, just really positive to see. Let's make sure that we don't just do it as a one-off. It might be helpful for this to go back into the quality committee, just so that we keep a handle on it, because there's some really important things here that we just need to make sure that we don't lose sight of. I know that we won't, but we need to make sure that we don't. But good to see. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm going to go to Lynn next. I'm going to leave Hilary a chance to maybe pull together some thoughts that she might like to do. Lynn, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. First
That's
time
right.
Thank you, Chair. Rosie, thank you. Really helpful report. And I know it's really resonated across services as well. And they really are considering this. I guess you do make the point in your report as well about the impact of some of our very highly complex service users remaining in inpatient beds when actually another placement is being sought. And I guess just want to make the connection that unfortunately, I think overall we're seeing a rise in the number of our inpatient service users in that position. It's connected to some of those pressures that we've already talked about today, as well around sort of local authorities, social care, placements. So again, I think you've noted, Rosie, that we continue to do everything we can to expedite those transfers to appropriate placements, but the context around that, just for the purposes of discussion at the board, you know, actually is becoming harder. At the moment, it is being raised at all system levels. I know Michelle's raising it through her forums as well and across our ICS, but it was just to add that context, Chair, that I think that is a factor for us right now.
Thanks, Lynn. Hilary?
So just to pick up on a couple of points there around the training, I'm sure most of you, if not all, do know that that is nationally mandated training in terms of the content and the length of the training as well. So we don't have a lot of wiggle room on that. So it's over 2 days. So it's been done as a face-to-face, but then some self-directed learning after it to complete it. The face-to-face is getting done, not sorry, the face-to-face, the teams, MSTs is getting done, but staff are then not always completing the self-directed learning after it because it sort of just drags on. It's just not working. So we are going to go back to face-to-face, but we also feel that's the right thing to do anyway because of the nature of the discussions you have in that content. You really do need to have people in the room to check that, you know, check how they are, check how they're feeling with some of the things that get discussed within a safeguarding context. And it's difficult to do that on Teams. So it might be a bit of a mix of a bit of Teams and face-to-face, but we need to, certainly from January, I've asked the team to get something in place that starts to pick that up. Picking up on Dean's point, yes, it's not all about just the training, we know that, but there are some staff that will not have had level 3 adults training. It came in a few years ago, it's not been around forever. So some people still haven't quite got onto that yet, so we've got to make sure that they get through that. But what we do every month is we look at the referrals across the trust, where the referrals are coming from. If they dip, we're straight on it. The safeguarding team are straight in there trying to find out why they've dipped that month to get any rationale behind that. So we would know straight away if we didn't have that safeguarding culture, because we wouldn't be getting the number of referrals that we get. And we can always see when things have happened, when the team have been out there, when there's been a lot of training, the referrals do change, and the quality of the referrals get better at times. Sometimes they go up. You know, we've got a good culture out there of reporting. We just need to get the training, you know, get everybody that they've had the training, so we will do that as well. I was going to suggest that the I think it's February Quality Committee picks this report up as in what we've done, because I'm aware that both Children and LD and Secure Services are both discussing this report in their networks and taking some things forward from it as well. So I think we should pick up where they've got to with it and what we're doing about it. And obviously down that commissioning route, that will be picked up in that forum as well, because there were some really key messages here around commissioning as well. And the main things, the recommendations I say, were CCGs, NHSE and the CQC as well, where those recommendations sat. But I think providers do need to do what we've done, which is look at exactly what John says. Could it happen here? Of course, things can always happen and never say that it couldn't, and make sure you've got all your checks and balances in and your ducks lined up, basically, is what we've tried to look at here.
Thanks very much, Hilary, for that information and explaining some of what is happening to address some of the concerns. Rosie, thank you. Is there anything you'd like to say before you leave us today? Further to the discussion?
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you, everyone, and nice to meet you all.
Thanks very much, Rosie, and welcome to the new job.
Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, Rosie. Nice to meet you.
Great. So moving on to item 19, items for escalation. I haven't received notice of any. No. Moving on then. Any other business? No. In that case, the public part of our Trust Board meeting today is closing, and we'll come back shortly for the private session. So thank you, everybody. Next public board meeting is on the 24th of November at 9:30 a.m. For those who've joined us today, thank you for watching.